Kia ora everybody, g'day. Good to be here. I hate hearing all my long cumbersome titles read out because they sound really boring. You've probably heard me say before in other forums that I am the Minister of Digital, or the Minister of New Stuff, the Minister of Telling Our Stories Better, the Minister of Open, which is my Associate State Services role, open government, and I do want to stress that because it is quite important. And I'm also, I guess you could call it the Minister for Closed, because it's cybersecurity. Maybe that's not a fair way to put it, but they all link up, they all join up, they bring to light the inherent tensions between how much you should be open and how much you shouldn't, and a whole lot of other dilemmas. But the digital across government and the digital outside of government is an incredibly important portfolio to bring together, because without that connection, we're not going to get much traction. I'm sure you've all got lots of thorny questions to ask me, so I'll talk a bit and then you can ask me questions. So I'm here actually to engage. This is engagement and also exploring ideas. This government is really trying to do things differently. We are really trying to seek the views of people out there and try and find better ways to have meaningful discussions and not just talk about things, but actually do things that aren't just done in isolation from whether it's the private sector, the community sector, citizenry generally. It's about, today I'm talking about a digitally connected, technology-enabled future for every Kiwi. It's about access to technology, regardless of your income or your geography or your skills, to take the opportunities that it presents. That means grappling with some quite tough issues, actually. As a government, we want to be able to measure how our policies and investments are making real improvements in people's lives, which means that we've got to measure what the divides are, what the state of the digital economy is now. We've got to do that a lot better than we have done previously. My two big initial goals, close the digital divides as soon as possible, make ICT, that thing called ICT, the second largest contributor to GDP by 2025. When I say that thing called ICT, it's because when we've got lots of different measures. They're a bit all over the show, actually. So there's a piece of work going on around trying to modernise that, make it much more relevant and much more transparent. But we also have to measure success as a government. We've got to measure success differently. We believe that New Zealand's economy shouldn't be judged on GDP alone. The measure must include social success and placing people's well-being at the heart of what we do. That's not just a fluffy concept. It's a concept that every government agency, including Treasury, which is leading that work, is grappling with at the moment as to how we can build in well-being to measure success in our country. New Zealand's recent strong economic growth is the result of years and years of hard graft by businesses and their workers, but the problem is there hasn't been enough benefit. It could be described as trickle down. We don't like using that phrase much, but strong growth hasn't translated into improved living standards and well-being that we want across the community. There's been more demand for food parcels, record numbers of homelessness. Far too many of our young people aren't working, learning or in training. And for us, that's not the signs of a successful economy. So we believe that we must transition to a more productive, sustainable and inclusive economy, which is overarching every piece of policy work that's being done at the moment, no matter which part of government it is. where we improve the living standards and well-being of all Kiwis. So I wanted to put that in context for you because there is a joined-up strategy that is being developed. I'll say a couple of words about productivity actually, because New Zealand's is good at creating more GDP growth. Over the last 20 years, we've averaged, I think, something like 2.8%, whereas the OECD average has been 2.1%. But we're good at working. We're good at working long hours. We're not so good at getting the growth out of each unit of labour, which is where, and that's the value add. So that's why you hear the phrase moving from volume to value so much coming from this government, because it's so important that we're moving towards a much more value-added economy, which is why every person in this room has an incredibly important part to play in that. How we up our productivity is a critical part of how we're going to succeed as a nation. And getting the infrastructure right is a really important basis to that. So I'm going to talk a bit about rural broadband rather than urban broadband. I could talk about urban broadband if you want me to, but I'll talk about rural. There's an enormous untapped potential in our rural communities, and the government has an unashamedly ambitious program to help building on what's been done before, but to help these communities compete equally in our 21st century economy. Improving rural connectivity empowers people to increase their productivity and benefit from a digital economy, especially with modern farm management. Through enhanced product connectivity, we can have precision agriculture, more sustainable farming. With technology, farmers can monitor effluent and water tanks and water levels in rivers and ponds. And actually, with better connectivity, maybe we would have had more farmers actually entering their stock movement details into the NATE system. That system may have had some issues, but one of the big issues was that lack of connectivity meant, and I see a bit of a head nodding going on in the room, meant that that system wasn't being properly used to track stock movements, which, while it didn't create our Plasma bovis issue, it has possibly contributed to the breadth of the issue happening across our country. We've got to get things like that right. Under Phase 2 of the Rural Broadband Initiative, more than 70,000 rural properties and businesses will have access to new or improved broadband, giving them more connectivity. RBI2 was initially scheduled for completion by the end of 2022, but I recently announced an accelerated timetable that will see this part of the build finished in 2021, 1 year ahead of schedule. I'd like it to be earlier than that. I've been doing a few functions around the country recently for UFB builds. I did Enable in Christchurch and Chorus in Dunedin recently, where their builds were completed around 19 months ahead of schedule. Wouldn't it be great if we could get this completed even faster than 2021? Then I could really start talking about closing the digital divides by 2020. Just a wee hint to RCG.
Thanks, Claire.
It's all right. MB also has a work stream dedicated to enhancing rural connectivity beyond that, called the expansion of RBI2, which means that rural New Zealand will have access to broadband even sooner, and I'm sure you're all perfectly aware of that. Just how far and fast that will happen will depend on finding land to build on and resolving geotechnical challenges. The further out you get, the more specific the issues are. But it is the right, much-needed step forward to lift our regions and our rural businesses. And when that expansion is complete, the aim is that broadband will cover 99% of the population, and I don't plan to stop there. I'd love to tell you more about that right now, but it's commercially sensitive. It's in process. I'm sure you'll probably try and get answers out of me anyway, but there will be an announcement soon. That announcement won't just come from me, it will come from myself and the Infrastructure Minister, Shane Jones. Deadly serious and comprehensive is what I'll say about it right now. We're all aware of the difficulties of bringing infrastructure to more remote communities, but it's possible to work together with communities and find solutions that make a big difference to the lives of hard-working rural New Zealanders. And I'm just going to use Haast as an example here. It was the largest mobile black spot in the country in one of our most remote areas. It's a tourist magnet, but it's 244 kilometres or something from Lake Hawea to Fox Glacier. It is a tourist magnet, but it's had no cell phone coverage and no way to call for help for victims of road crashes. I visited Haast in March, and by the beginning of May, we had a tower built and operating. It was 3G, admittedly, but to be honest, that's actually the power of government and the local community working together and sticking up its hand and shouting, which I thought was a perfectly valid thing for it to be doing. An average of 460 calls a day now go through that tower. It handles around 310 texts each day, and the average data volume that goes through the tower daily is 11.2 gigabits. It doesn't sound that much, but it is, if it's saving lives, if it's enabling the local nurse in Haast to not be sitting physically next to an actual phone every day because she doesn't dare leave it in case it rings and it means somebody's life is lost, then, that's worth it. Haast is a great example of a community that came to us with part of the solution, the land for the tower, which is why I urge rural communities to bring their ideas and resources and work together with us to solve the connectivity issues faster. A new 25-metre mast is also nearly complete at Lake Wahaupo. Keen fly fishers will know this area is in the Westland National Park. I'm not a fly fisher. Do people know where that is? Hopefully they do. That new tower will be operational within a few weeks, providing coverage for the tourist and fishing hotspot and 4.5 kilometres of state highway. The WISPs, the wireless internet service providers, also have a role here using tailored, innovative and small-scale solutions to reach remote and rural areas. And I really want to thank the WISPs for the work that they're doing, the energy that they're putting into this to help people increase their productivity and benefit from the digital economy. It's not just the energy, it's actually the good ideas, the innovation that you're providing in this space. WISPs and retail service providers also have a big role coming up, which is a big test, literally, several tests, coming next year, which is the Rugby World Cup in 2019. Spark and TVNZ won the broadcast rights for Rugby World Cup. Their plan is for people to watch streamed matches on their smart TVs, tablets, laptops and phones. I imagine that most people in this room have been watching what's happening in Australia in the last week or so with Optus streaming the Football World Cup. Could be described as a meltdown, which is now seen, I've heard some people call it some other names, that has seen Optus Australia give all group games to SBS, which is the Australian free-to-air channel. Lagging and freezing video, frequent dropouts and picture quality problems outraged sports fans and prompted the Australian Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull to speak to the Optus CEO. I know how important rugby is to New Zealanders, and I want as many as possible to be able to see next year's Rugby World Cup games live, which is why I'm watching really closely, along with the Minister of Sport, what Spark is doing to head off any similar issues here ahead of the Rugby World Cup kick-off. really encouraged that Spark has set up an industry working group made up of technical and operational experts to work closely together to ensure they give New Zealanders a good Rugby World Cup experience. And I understand that part of that group's work is to resolve potential problems. I also wrote to Spark earlier this month asking them to keep me informed about its plans to ensure that rural New Zealand doesn't miss out on the opportunity to see the entire tournament. Our technology future, very complex. Why I'm appointing a Chief Technology Officer. That appointment's getting closer, hopefully next month. Once in place, will provide the independent and expert advice from a whole of society perspective, not just a government or technologist perspective. At a high level, the CTO will play a lead role in developing a digital strategy for New Zealand, will have a broad mandate to serve as a challenge to and advisor for the New Zealand government. The newly or relatively newly formed Digital Economy and Digital Inclusion Ministerial Advisory Group, otherwise known as DDI-MAG, will provide support and advice to the CTO and is already providing support and advice to me. DDI is working on advice for the government on how we can build the digital economy and reduce the digital divides. One of its first tasks is to help create a blueprint for digital inclusion to help us define where we're heading and how we might get there. Those members have formed 5 breakout groups looking at digital inclusion, maximising potential, building capability, digital connectivity and adapting to disruption. There's an overlap obviously between those subgroups, but they're working closely together to avoid duplication. I've asked them to clearly define what constitutes the digital economy, what drives it, and what are the things that government can or should influence. And there is a stream of work that MB is and statistics are working on at the moment to clarify that. They will also be liaising with the OECD. I want New Zealand to be seen as one of the world leaders in terms of how it measures the digital economy, and we've got to get our act together around that. I've also asked the subgroups to look at how we can get everyone working more effectively together to ensure that new thinking happens, and that actually involves you, because I've got 15 people on an advisory group, but I actually want to have many, many, many more people than that. I can only logistically liaise with 15. They're expected to liaise with all their networks and to build their networks out. So I want you to be furiously engaging with them and ensuring that your ideas come through those groups and that you get a hearing. In addition, I've got several pieces of work underway to enable and encourage uptake and include more people and businesses in our digital economy. That is the really important next step. So I could stand here and talk about rural connectivity or whatever all day, but it's actually what happens with that connectivity that really matters and is going to deliver the value. Tech industry employs around 100,000 people and 28,000 companies, which is around 5% of the workforce. The Digital Nation New Zealand report released by NZ Tech, which we need to keep on doing this work so that we've got more up-to-date figures, estimates that for every dollar invested in growing the tech sector productivity, there's a $3 return on investment. Well, I've recently read somewhere that there's actually a $5 return. So again, we've got to get those measures worked out and keep that information really current. Companies that make smart use of internet services are 6% more effective than average firms in their sector. And the report says that while Auckland, Wellington and Christchurch all have large tech sectors, regional New Zealand is also benefiting from the growth of the tech sector. I'll use my own city, Dunedin, as an example of that, where there's a fairly rapid increase in, for example, the gaming sector that's happening in Dunedin. I want to see more of that, looking at how government can add more value into that sector. And I've also just announced a report, the first ever report into the gaming sector in New Zealand, and how we can extract more value from that. What are the levers that government can be using? What can be done to increase that sector? Rural areas drive our largest industry, primary production. Connectivity can provide opportunities for people to enjoy country lifestyles but work in city jobs. Adopting technology is essential for both the survival and economic growth of rural New Zealand. Because technology is a proven link to increased productivity, the government is trialling new ways to help small and medium sized businesses, in particular to understand the value of digital tools so they'll use them more. It's estimated that 28% of New Zealand's GDP is produced by businesses with fewer than 20 staff, so MB has kicked off pilot programs for SMEs focused on tourism, construction and arable farming. So I want to talk more about that soon. I'm pushing for those projects to be to move as quickly as possible, because we want to be able to work out how we can add value in those sectors. Generally, MB's developing a package of digital tools for firms to test at local and industry events. So to conclude, before you all barrage me with questions, we all need to be innovative and make our services more effective, more inclusive and accessible in a digital-rich world. We need the right frameworks in place so that communities and industries, both rural and urban, can enjoy the benefits of a digital world. We need your ideas to grow the digital economy, to work with us. Government doesn't have a monopoly on good ideas. Sometimes government doesn't have enough good ideas. So that all New Zealanders, even those who live in our most remote areas, can embrace digital opportunities. Every New Zealander needs to be on that journey with us, know how to access, use digital technology, trust the systems. I could have given another speech about trust, the importance of trust and confidence that we have to manage and protect our information. It's about all of us, not just some of us. So thanks.